Recording. Welcome everyone to it's Tuesday, July 14th, the third installment of Tuesday Night Live here at Huntington. I just want to go over, as we do every Tuesday, just go over some housekeeping stuff and intro us in here. A couple things. This is being recorded for anyone that needs it. As I mentioned before, we will have that available to people through YouTube to view at a later date. So if there's something in here that you forget during the recording, or if you have friends that want to view this or family, feel free to reach out to those emails and we can get those recordings for you. Also, throughout this time, you might have questions about anything that our speakers are saying. We would love to answer those questions for you. That's what this is all about. It's to build relationships and just kind of express what Huntington's doing and just connect you with some senior leaders and some directors here on campus just to get your questions answered, but also to spend this time to get to know them a little bit better. And so feel free to send in questions. You can send those directly to the chat feature on Zoom. You can send those to me directly, or you can send them to my friend Nick Harmson, who's in there. I can't actually see him, but you can send them to him directly, and we'll get those questions to the speakers, which would be perfect. Also, it seems like everyone's good with this now, but if you could make sure your voices stay muted, along your audio and your visual stays muted, just so that we can give some respect to those speakers so that they can get through the things they did, and so people can focus on that and listen to that accordingly. Also, in here in a second, we're going to introduce ourselves. But I like to always start out these sessions with we're live from Huntington. It's Tuesday night, so we're so excited. Tonight we're going to be talking about athletics and also some COVID precautions and procedures coming up. I know it's a great topic that it's kind of in the center of everything right now, and so it's really important to Huntington. So we're really excited for the night. I'm Quentin Graves. I'll be your host, and I will continue to be the host throughout the next couple weeks that we're doing this. I love this. I was a student recently. I just graduated in January. I'm an admissions counselor now. Many of you are my friends. Some of you are students that I've actually brought in, and that are prospective students that I've worked with, which is so cool to see you guys on here. But I love Huntington and I love working with students. So this was like the perfect fit for everything that I enjoy about Huntington. Next, I'm going to have Nick introduce himself.
Hey guys, I'm Nick Harmson. I'm a senior admissions counselor at Huntington. This is my 5th year in admissions. I got my undergrad, my graduate degree at HU as well. So I've been around Huntington for about 10 years, and I'm an assistant coach on the men's soccer staff. So I know we'll be talking some athletics today as well. So I've been coaching for 6 years. So kind of know both sides of this. So Danny, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Nick. My name is Danny Solms. I have the privilege of serving as the Vice President for Enrollment, and Quentin's let me be the bouncer tonight for the waiting room, so I'm excited about that. So I'll turn things over to Lori Culler.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lori Culler. I'm the athletic director and women's basketball coach. I've been here 34 years. I'll be looking toward 35 this fall. So a few gray hairs along the way, but we're trying to hide those a little bit still. We have a lot of information that we want to share with you tonight about athletics and kind of where we're at right now. As you can imagine, things continue to change on the COVID-19 landscape pretty much daily. So we are trying to keep our head above water and keep moving forward and doing our best to prepare for a safe and healthy return to play this fall. So I'll talk more here in a little bit, but I will let Russ Degitz introduce himself next.
Hi, everybody. As Lori said, my name is Russ Degitz, and I have the privilege of serving as the Chief Operating Officer here at Huntington University. I did my undergraduate work as a forester as well, and graduated back when it was Huntington College at that time. I received some postgraduate degrees, including my doctorate from another unnamed institution, certainly not Huntington, but appreciated the opportunity to have those. I joined the Forrester family as an employee just about a year ago as the COO. but did serve in education before that, since graduating from HC at that time, serving 17 years in public K-12 education, including principal at Huntington North High School, which is just a couple of blocks away from our campus. So excited to be with you tonight and share some updates on where we're at with COVID-19 and athletics.
All right, so I thought I would just kind of give everybody a little bit of an update on kind of what the NAIA has, how they have been directing us over the last week or so. July 1st, they came out with kind of their first set of instructions for fall. First of all, they have set start dates for both practice times and competition times. At some point here in the near future, if you're an incoming fall or winter sport athlete, you'll be hearing from either your coach or the student life staff about move-in dates and times to campus. We're working on finalizing who will arrive at what time slot on what day. So hopefully that information will be available in the next week or so. The NAIA has determined that practices may begin on Saturday, August 15th, and first competition dates for all sports, with the exception of football, which we do not have. So for all of our sports, will begin on Saturday, September 5th. They have given us some guidance in terms of protocols for screening athletes daily, as well as specific protocols for testing and screening on game days. I'm not going to belabor that point right now. That's more information that we will be sharing more specifically with the athletes the closer we get to getting you back here on campus, because obviously we're going to need your help in doing some self-monitoring and screening daily before you would participate in any kind of activity with your team, whether that be a conditioning practice, a regular practice, whether it would be a game day competition, those kinds of things. So we'll definitely be needing your help on that. We are really working to continue to finalize plans for the testing that the NAIA is going to require. They will be requiring every athlete to be tested 7 days prior to their first competition. And so at this point in time, we're working with Parkview and a company down in Indianapolis to try to figure out what that testing looks like, who will do it, how will results be, how quickly can the results get back to us. So we're working on those things, and also in terms of, how those tests get paid for, whether it's through insurance, whether if insurance doesn't cover it, will the institution cover it? So a lot of questions there that we're still working through with the testing policy or testing part of the protocol. Obviously, we've been working closely with Parkview too in terms of trying to establish best practices for returning to practice, and what social distancing looks like within a given sport, what cleanliness and sanitization of equipment looks like after use, and just different things in the facility in terms of the use of the various weight rooms and exercise pieces of equipment and those kinds of things. So we're diligently working on putting together all of the protocols and procedures for those things. So that again will be information that will be more specifically shared either right before you get here or once you do arrive on campus, to try to get everybody on the same page and how we can safely move forward with our fall sports seasons. So I think I'll leave it at that, and then just if nobody else, I don't know who else might be talking here, but I can answer questions at whatever point we get to that.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lori. We're going to go to Russ now, talk a little bit about COVID, and then when we get to the Q&A session, like I said, if you have any questions about athletics, make sure you save those, and we will answer those when we get to that little section there.
Thanks, Quentin. So I get to talk about everybody's favorite topic tonight, which is COVID. I think there is a wide variety of kind of responses when people hear that now, right? I mean, you hear COVID-19 and some people shudder, some people may think it's not such a big deal, but The one thing I would say, just to put some context around our discussion tonight, this really struck me. So we all know, if you were on campus last year, or if you were maybe a senior in high school, or if you're just joining us, we all know that this really hit home for our country and for us as a university in mid-March, when we went out for spring break. Unfortunately, we didn't really get to come back. And that seems like a lifetime ago, but that was really just 4 months ago. And we are looking to return everybody safely to campus here in a month. So the context to that is, if you think about the time frame between last March, when this first struck, and when we're going to return in August, we still have 20% of that time frame to go yet. And if you think about how much has changed in the first 80% of that time frame, there's still a lot that can change here. And so we've received a lot of questions from students and some constituents wondering why we haven't, necessarily released a whole host of comprehensive plans and details. So I would say part of that is intentional, to make sure that the timing is such that we can gather appropriate information. The other reality to that is we're really close to releasing a lot of that information. Dr. Emberton, our president, has put together a construct that will be making that information available over the course of the next couple of weeks. So make sure you keep your eyes and ears open. The other context I guess I would share is that without hesitation, we have health and safety of our students, our employees, as a top priority. We obviously want the experience at HU to be rich and meaningful and full of the residential life that I guess students sign up for when they choose HU. But at this point in time, there's just a different normal. And so we want to make sure we mitigate those risks responsibly, while still affording each one of you the rich experience that you signed up for. And again, the reason that you chose HU. Hopefully it goes without saying, but I want to assure each and every one of you that we are following and going to be recommending as guidelines the best practices as communicated by the CDC. They are the leading experts for our country, and what really have driven the various states' protocols. And so we will be following those as well. And a couple of quick comments that have stuck with me as I've spent a lot of time diving into this and formulating some plans for the university. One was shared as part of a cohort group that I'm a part of with other colleagues around other campuses. And the phrase diligently flexible and flexibly vigilant came up. So we're going to have to be flexible, but we're going to be diligent about what we do. But we're also going to be vigilant about caring for each other. We live in a community at HU, especially those students that are on campus, on our main campus, those students in Arizona, those students in Fort Wayne as part of our OTD program. Those are pockets of our family. And so we want to be vigilant about taking care of each other and keeping each other's health and safety in mind. The other phrase that really comes to mind was shared by one of our partners with Parkview Health Systems, which is the leading medical provider here in the Huntington area. And it's Dr. Maddox. He shared, we may not be perfect in what we do, but we will do our best. And so just because we may not be able to strike that perfect plan as we roll out what we're doing on campus, it won't stop us from doing the absolute best we can for each and every one of you. And so keep that in mind as I talk about our plans tonight. There may be some questions you ask along the way that we don't have final answers on, but we are having this as part of our daily conversation. If not minute to minute, then certainly day to day. And so I'm going to categorize my comments in two quick areas, kind of the physical prep that you'll see when you come back to campus, facilities, things that will actually be tangible, and then also kind of some protocols and guidelines. They may not be seen, but just the way that we kind of will expect each other to behave and some of the guidelines that we'll undertake when we come back. So I'll start with that physical prep. First, I'll say that several key people have done walkthroughs of every single space on campus. Faculty have been engaged in that. Senior leaders have been engaged in that. People that call certain buildings home have been a part of that. And so we've really tried to leave no stone unturned. Some things that you'll see when you come back on campus with the physical preparations include some maximized furniture layouts. So you might not have all the seating available that you might be accustomed to, or seating that was in certain areas might be pushed back or spread out to allow some distancing between it. So just understand that that is to follow the 6 feet recommended distance by the CDC for social distancing. You'll see some signs for our buildings, especially for external doors for entrance and exit only. Again, that will be for maximized social distancing. There will also be some stairwells that are up or down only, and that'll be to prevent bottlenecks of congestion and things like that. So just be aware and conscientious of signage. For some of our lab spaces, namely computer labs and some science labs, there will be some barriers that have been constructed. That will help us to kind of keep each person's space their own when they're working in the lab space, and it might not be quite so easy to socially distance. We'll be able to lean on some barriers that will help keep, again, people's space their own. In office spaces around campus, if you happen to visit some of those locations in Becker Hall or the Plex for the athletic office or just the various spots where staff may be, our maintenance department has created some plexiglass barriers so that we can communicate with other people in a safe environment. We also are going to be looking at some maximized capacities for spaces that maybe aren't quite so easy to allow our usual flow and usual capacity. So spaces like our temporary location for the bookstore, weight rooms in the Plex, and even the dining commons really will have some capacity limits placed on them so that we can prevent congestion and overcrowding. As I mentioned, there will be signage located around campus. In fact, this summer even, there is signage located on almost every external door and in break rooms and workrooms for staff. That will continue to increase, again, with the placed signage for entrance and exit only, areas for doors and other spaces, just to help remind us and direct us on what we can do to help keep each other safe and healthy. One of the other more noticeable physical preparations will be 6 tents that are located around campus. We have 3 larger tents and 3 smaller tents that will be strategically placed so that we can provide just some extra outdoor venue space for socializing. One of them will be located right next to the dining commons to allow a little extra space there to spread out and still be able to eat with friends in a safe way. And then if professors and faculty want to be super creative and it's a nice day, some of your classes might even be held outside. For our main campus folks, those tents will be available for those types of activities. I believe Dr. Coffey and Reverend Wilson are looking at some kind of student life activities, whether it be a movie night, some classes to be held in those, maybe even some virtual chapels. So we hope to maximize the outdoor space through those tents. In terms of some protocols and guidelines that will be less seen, but more just how we behave and how we modify our activities. I've created a student flow chart that will be released in the near future that will help give guidance for students on all 3 of our campus locations to work from if something happens. So if they don't feel well, what in the world do I do? If I test positive for COVID, what in the world do I do? If my roommate tests positive, what do I do? If I'm friends with somebody but really didn't have a lot of close interaction, what do I do? It'll just provide some guidance for those types of things so that somebody doesn't feel like they're on an island and going at it alone. We're going to have a phone number if somebody just isn't sure what to do, to be able to reach out to and talk with a student life staff member, similar to our campus police phone, where that should be available pretty much 24/7. As mentioned, we're going to be following best practices as recommended by the CDC. That will include wearing of masks during certain times and in certain places. It certainly won't be in all locations, but in locations where you won't be able to social distance or areas outside of kind of a bubble of your residence hall room or an apartment as you're moving about campus will be expected. We're again going to be expecting social distancing. Dr. Fetters, our Vice President for Academic Affairs, has really worked diligently with faculty and the registrar to have some maximum capacity areas where we can fit classes in a safe way. And obviously things that have been tried and true even when flu season hits. Washing hands regularly. You'll see hand sanitizer everywhere on campus. We are committed to making sure those tools are available to help keep people safe. We also are going to implement extra cleaning around campus. So spaces like residence hall restrooms will receive some extra cleaning. Those spaces that are a little more high frequency and high touch will receive some. We might even ask some faculty and students when they leave classrooms to go through a quick cleaning protocol, just because of the sheer volume of classes and the turnover required. And so we will be providing some cleaning supplies for that. All of our cleaning supplies are approved at the levels suggested by the CDC, including some cool technology like a fogging machine that will be able to go into a space and provide a fogging mist that kind of resets that classroom within about 5 minutes. And so we have invested at a high level to make sure, again, everybody is safe and healthy. We also are making sure that we really strategically limit the number of external folks that come into our campus through November. And so we are at this point looking to really reduce large scale events through November 1st. Athletic events in terms of patrons and fans are still being given consideration in conjunction with the NAIA and the Crossroads League. But events like large catering events or dinners in the upper level banquet hall of the dining commons, those types of things are going to be limited just so we can protect our students that are on campus. We feel like that's really important as people would have the potential to bring things into our buildings. And so we are really reducing those opportunities. We do have a self-monitoring checklist that's been created that will ask each student, staff, and faculty member to be mindful of. Athletics, I know we're talking about that tonight, will really become well acquainted with that. At every practice or event, they'll go through that checklist. But that'll be a way for us to measure if maybe we're not feeling well, we ought to stay back in our residence halls or our apartments and not attend class for the day. So those will be some good guidelines for us to think of about how we're feeling. We also have some guidelines created for travel and university vehicles, things like some cleaning protocols that our maintenance team will go through, things like, assigned seats. So if you go somewhere as part of a field trip or an athletic team, assigning seats so that we make sure that everybody sits by kind of the same person and is using the same space. If you can't socially distance, we'll have some masks, expectations, and those types of things. And I guess the last thing that I would say that's really important, because we're not experts in this, we lean on a lot of colleagues and people from other institutions that are kind of fighting the same fight that we are. But the best people that we can tap into are the health experts and those in the medical field on the front lines. And so I have been really since day one acutely plugged into a group that involves our local health department in Huntington County. They have been outstanding with sharing resources with our university and the local schools and local employers. They provide us with an answer at any point in time. They've provided cell phone numbers, and we, again, tap into them all the time to make sure that we're implementing the best, most recent information. And as I mentioned, we're also including and investing at a high level with Parkview. Our athletic department and teams are partnered with Parkview Sports Medicine. Parkview Hospital is a short couple of blocks from our campus. And so it just makes sense for us to be engaged in a lot of collaborative conversations with them. And so we are making sure that we are aligning our protocols, guidelines, physical preparations with those people that just know this best. And of course, they're getting new information daily as we learn more about this novel coronavirus, this new virus. But they are getting that new information at their fingertips more quickly than we are. And they've been great at sharing that and great at resourcing us with the things that we need. And so there's certainly a lot more that we've unpacked and are looking at, but those are some highlights that I really would want you to take away. And I guess at the end of the day, we talked about this a little bit when we were preparing for all the students to join us. We want this to be the best experience we can make it. And we realize that when we create some limited restrictions and some guidelines, that it might seem to chip away at what you would like and we would like, everybody would like that experience to be. But at the end of the day, it's placing a premium on our health and safety so that we can continue to be together. So we don't have to experience what we did last spring and send people home and put in jeopardy the residents' life experience that we all think is the heartbeat of our campus. And so I guess I would turn it back over to Quentin, and I obviously will be more than happy to entertain questions or address concerns, and be the first to say we may not have exact answers on things, but we'll do our best to address those tonight.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Russ. I really appreciate that. I think that's something that, I always mention this, and if you were here for the first Tuesday Night Live, Dr. Babb kind of mentioned the same thing that, in the end, I really believe, in working with all these people for Tuesday Night Live, I really believe that everyone's working really hard to give us the best experience that we can in the fall, which is super, super cool, and makes me happy to be a forester. We do have a bunch of questions coming in, so I'm going to start going through some of those. One question that came in early on is, will there be open gyms, and will the Plex be open for all students?
I can answer that. At this point in time, yes, once we have students starting to come back to campus in the middle of August, the Plex will have hours that it will be open. At this point in time, it will probably be fairly similar, if not identical, to the hours that have been typical for the Plex. Open gyms will be probably a little bit more dependent on what's, kind of what sport it is. I know when we come back in the middle of August, some teams, the fall sports will be immediately going into their regular season practices, preseason practices. Some of the winter sports that are coming back, there will be probably some potential there for open gyms. So I don't know if there's a specific sport you're talking about. I can talk more specifically about that, but in general, that would be how I would answer that question.
Awesome. Super cool. And then another question came in. Let me make sure I can group some of these if possible. I do want to remind everyone, if there's something about chapel, or we can maybe touch on some student life. I don't know if Russ feels comfortable with that, but I do know that next week is going to be actual student life team. So it's up to Russ if he wants to touch on some of these, but we do have some student life questions. But I do know for chapel, we'll touch base on campus ministries let me make sure on my schedule, actually next week as well. So campus ministry stuff, we'll talk about those for sure. But let me look here. What are some ways that you guys expect to limit the spread of the virus in the dorms? So that's a little bit more broad, not just what student life related.
Sure, and that's a great question. We're going to need to have a partnership and kind of that community agreement, so to speak, that we all will abide by, and that is doing our level best to make sure we're mindful of others. To directly answer the question about some steps that will look differently, I mentioned some capacities in certain spaces, so certainly some of the residence hall common areas like the lounges will experience some of that, just because obviously we still need to promote social distancing. Again, I mentioned the extra cleaning that will take place, so that will include residence halls. The CDC recommends 2 times a day, so we will be meeting at least the minimum expectation, particularly in the restrooms. We'll have groups that go around and hit the high touch surfaces a little bit more than that, such as doorknobs and some of the hardware spaces that just get touched more frequently. And so those are some of the things that we'll do. Our residence directors and RAs will be receiving obviously some training when they come back to help provide some guidance and some specific things, because each dorm is a little different. Some have several students sharing the same restroom, while others have more of a suite structure. And so those general approaches are going to be some of the things that we do. The other thing I guess I would say really briefly and quickly is, once a student leaves his or her kind of residence hall room, their specific room, and go into the hallway or to do laundry or lounge area, we're gonna ask and have an expectation that students and others wear masks because of those common area potential proximity points. And I lied. One last thing that we'll do is we're really going to protect the residence halls and who comes into them. So really, we are not going to allow external visitors into those spaces. So even parents at this point We're not discouraging them from being on campus, but we are going to say for the health and safety of all of our students that any connections and any socializing, any, parent-student, parent-child connections would take place at another venue. If it's good weather, that can be outside. But again, just with so many other students being in that facility, it's best if we keep those to students and staff only.
Russ. There's a couple questions on, I guess this would be a great question for Lori, and maybe Russ too. Will we be quarantined if we travel for tournaments? And multiple sports were represented in those, so.
Yeah, right now we're trying to figure out our exact plan on travel for teams in the fall. I know we have some specific plans in place where we're limiting the size of the numbers of people that we would invite to a specific event to 25 or less until like November 1st, I believe. And so in terms of trying to keep people safe, if people are traveling, are really going to try to suggest that teams not stay overnight anywhere and just go to the competition and come back. So if there's a tournament, it's a 2-day thing, then what we would hope is, or ask is that they travel there and back and then travel to the same place and back the next day to avoid the overnight stay in a hotel. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but we're also not going to probably have, volleyball. I don't know who asked the question, but if it was a volleyball athlete, they typically have a lot of tournaments. And so because of the NAIA cutting the number of contests for fall sports by 20%, probably most of the competitions for volleyball will be a 1-day event of some sort.
The other thing I might add to that too, just because of, again, how rapidly things evolve, the decisions we're making for athletics and continuing to monitor will be for the fall sports season. We'll kind of take it season by season because things can change so dramatically. And so we will stay consistent throughout that season and ask all of our coaches and programs to abide by those. But obviously things could change pretty dramatically by the time spring sports arrive. And so that's why our communications right now are focused primarily on the fall sports because that's what's most immediate.
Awesome. That's another theme that I constantly keep seeing, which is really awesome, is, in this time, there's a lot of patience and a lot of patience and a lot of flexibility and a lot of things, which is, I know is important at this time because everything is, you never know. This week could be way different than what next week brings. So awesome. Another question. Let me make sure I get down to it. If students aren't feeling well, is there a way for them to join in their class virtually? For Lily, I know you asked that question, and I'll let Russ talk on it too, but I know we touched on it during the academic session a little bit. But I know Luke mentioned that there might be a quarantine area, and if so, we might be allowing students to Zoom in to certain things. But Russ, if you have any more to talk about on that.
Yeah, certainly one of the most important things in our protocols, and part of the reason we have that self-monitoring checklist, is if a student is not feeling well, especially with COVID-19 symptoms, we are really, really adamant that they not go to class live in person because obviously we want to make sure that we get ahead of any potential issues. So with that, we are reasonable and understand that we may have to have some virtual options, particularly if that kind of quarantine period or an illness or symptoms might be prolonged. And so Dr. Fetters is working with faculty to make sure that they are responsive to that. We're also looking at what kind of the best fits for technology to offer that kind of delivery might be. Some classes will be a little easier to kind of connect somebody to compared to others. Your lecture-based class for that particular day is easier than a lab, for example. But one of the things I mentioned earlier was kind of that diligently flexible and flexibly vigilant. And so faculty know that as well. And so there will be the need for us to offer virtual formats for those that need it. and working to make sure that it's available.
Thanks, Russ. There's been a question about clubs. Undignified Ultimate Frisbee were some that were thrown out. Are these things that are still going to be held, or are they still kind of in the process of being discussed? And I'm guessing they also asked what steps will be these clubs, but I'm guessing if they are held, there'll probably be similar precautions to the rest of sports.
Yeah, we're looking at things like intramurals, even like theater productions, those types of things that are an important part of campus life and the heartbeat of what we do. We certainly don't want to eliminate those completely. I'm not going to say that some of those, if it's not possible to responsibly and reasonably put protocols in place, won't be either delayed or canceled for a portion. But I would say if there are reasonable accommodations and adjustments that can be made, then those things may look differently, but our plan is to still provide those opportunities. So similar to athletics, I'll just use an example with theater. We still want to provide a theater experience for the students that have that as a major and that are part of those productions, but we'll make a decision on whether or not we will open those to external patrons to take in and visit and watch as we kind of know a little bit more the path that we're taking with larger campus events in the fall.
Thanks, Russ. Also, there's another, this is a great question. Because we mentioned with our many community bathrooms in the res halls, those are obviously cleaned by staff, but the suite style bathrooms are usually cleaned by residents. Typically, I know that for a fact. So will those be cleaned as well, or will stuff be provided for proper cleaning for those?
Yeah, that is a great question. At this point, our plan is to make sure that all residence hall bathrooms are cleaned. Now, that's not to say that if a resident or a student wants to do some extra cleaning, that he or she shouldn't do that or won't be permitted to do that. But we, again, are committed to making sure that those are cleaned. One of the things that we have at our disposal that is the game changer for us in that regard will be the fogging machine that allows one of our housekeepers to go in and literally within probably a 10-minute time span reset that restroom when it comes to sanitation. They can spray the fog and the mist. It takes about 5 minutes. It takes 5 minutes for it to set and kind of dry, and then it would be open for use again. So I guess I share that caveat to say the COVID type cleaning will be taken care of by our housekeepers, but the other type of cleaning that the students have typically done of their own space would still be consistent with previous years.
Quentin, I see that somebody added what will bowlers do, and I'm assuming that was in response to the tournament question that I answered earlier, because bowlers do have a lot of tournaments typically. And so I don't have a copy of the bowling schedule yet for fall. I know you get started usually in October sometime with tournaments, but I know that there has been discussion about trying to make everything a one-day tournament, but I've not seen anything specifically come down from the NAIA about that yet. But I know they are talking about that. And so a lot of what we'll have to rely on is what the NAIA mandates. And obviously our own policies, we're trying to limit through November 1st, overnight stays and things like that. But after November 1st, then we will open up things a little bit more on campus and probably allow more things to take place at that point. So if we can get to November 1st without having any bowling tournaments and just have a single day sessions for whatever is taking place prior to November 1, then I think we would be okay moving forward from there. But again, we just have to wait for some guidance from the NAIA for some of those kinds of things. Somebody else also asked, I see why we're moving in early, and I believe it's a bowler that has posted that. And I know that in the past, winter sports have not typically moved in at the same time as the fall sport athletes. But given that we've not been able to do anything this summer with our teams in terms of camps or open gyms or open alleys, if that's what you would call it in bowling. I don't know. We wanted to give, the winter sports an opportunity to have some extra time together as a team prior to school starting. So I guess that, is the best explanation I can give you at this point, to just build in some extra time for the team to get together and kind of start developing that chemistry and unity.
Thank you so much, Lori. Yeah, I know those questions came up, and I was going to circle back to them because I know Nick is doing some recon in the back. So I'm glad that you brought those up, because I didn't for sure know what they meant. So I'm glad that you did. So I appreciate that. There's a couple questions. There's actually, for Russ, there's a lot of questions pertaining to move-in. And some of this you may know, and if you don't, that's okay. We can touch base on it for student life next week, but just let me know if that is the case. There are questions on, can we have, parents and immediate families help us move in and set up during the move-in process?
Yeah, great question. So if you've been a part of move-in day before, or a student on campus previously, you know that it's a pretty awesome sight to just see alumni and part of the Forrester family, a large portion of our Forrester family, back to help move in. It probably won't look the same, but we're also not going to deny students the opportunity to have some people help move them in. I would like to defer to Dr. Coffey and some of the student life staff regarding specific numbers. I think in a general sense, what we would say is to keep the move-in kind of tight, meaning, extended family and multiple generations. And if you have 10 siblings, inviting all 10 siblings, those types of things. In any other year, we would absolutely encourage and love to see. But we're going to be encouraging some limitations to that. And I'll let Dr. Coffey and the student life staff speak a little more specifically to it. But again, those types of people, parents specifically, would have an opportunity to come in and be a part of that.
Awesome. Thanks, Russ. Yes, next week we're going to have Dean of Students Brian Jaworski and our campus pastor Arthur. So like I said, chapel or student life questions, we can definitely field those your way. So tune in next week for that. There is also another question. You brought up the fogging machine. So someone had a question about the chemicals that were used in that machine, and people that are highly sensitive to certain chemicals. Is that something that is being thought about in that?
Yeah, another great question. We certainly don't want to trade one health risk for another. And so, we don't want to create increased exposures or problems for students that have those sensitivities while we're trying to do our best to protect from COVID. So I can't say the specific chemicals that are being used as I sit here, but I can share that we have vetted those to make sure that they've been approved by CDC and the groups that are highly aware and much more of an expert than I am. I would say if there are specific concerns about specific chemicals, any student is welcome to reach out to me, welcome to put that on the radar of a residence hall director, and we can get ahead of that before it's applied. But I would also say with this particular procedure with kind of the fogging machine, it's not like a student would walk in and there would be this heavy fog still hanging in the air. It is a mist. It does settle. It would be the equivalent of going in and wiping it with wipes. That's why there's that 5 to 10 minute kind of settling period after it's sprayed. And so there shouldn't be additional odor and those types of things that would cause a concern for students' health.
Awesome. Thanks, Ross. Another question. Lori, do you mind just re-saying the teams that are moving in early? We had a question about that.
Yes, we haven't solidified the times and dates specific as August 13th or 14th, but we don't know for sure yet which team's moving in what time slots. But all the fall sports will be moving in, as well as basketball and bowling of the winter sports.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Russ, do you for the time slots for regular move-in? Do we know those yet, or know when those will be posted?
No, similarly to Lori's comment, we know the dates, but Brian Jaworski next week will be able to fill those details in a little bit better. Obviously, I guess I would just say in general, since the idea is to try and spread that out a little bit so there's not this massive wave all at one time. There's still going to be some congestion, but the idea will be to spread it out so we have a little less traffic up and down stairwells. And on that note, we are going to be incorporating additional cleaning with additional staff on handrails and doorknobs those days too, just because that'll be our first kind of big set of days as people come onto campus. So he will be able to share more details next week.
Super cool. And then a question on restricting visitors. Will those restrictions apply to commuters? Because we know commuters can come and go freely now in the res halls. Will those restrictions apply to them, or are they kind of treated as just another student?
Yeah, great question. That might be something again for Dr. Jaworski, but I would say we don't want any student member of our Forrester family to feel like they're being lessened as a member of that family. So my assumption and I think our plan is to make sure that they would have access to those spaces. Commuters are going to be sitting in classes alongside residence hall students or resident students. And so that wouldn't be the level of concern. The big level of concern would be truly external folks that come from a variety of locations and had, maybe multiple interactions with, people outside of our HU space. And so students on our campus would have access to buildings, but what we're trying to limit are the people that come off campus that are not part of our student body.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That is all the questions that I have so far. I don't see any coming in. So a lot of themes in there, which is awesome. I kind of always go back to that flexibility, and that's what we're kind of the name of the game for this week or for this semester coming up. It sounds like a lot of people have some great questions for spiritual life, for campus ministries, and for res life. So feel free to tune in. Oh, there is a question real quick. When those 2 weeks, when athletes do, the 2 weeks that athletes do come before classes start, will they be allowed to go freely off of campus, or are they required to stay just on campus during those 2 weeks?
Well, I think our intention would be to try to keep them on campus within our safe little bubble for the if we're kind of looking at it almost as a 2-week quarantine. If you've been following any of the professional sports, you see that they're doing a lot of the same thing, maybe in a little nicer, warmer climate. I don't know, but we have a beautiful campus. So, this is a great place to spend 2 weeks. So, but yeah, I mean, we can't, demand that you stay on campus, but, in order for us to think about successfully executing our fall sports semester, we really do need to be extremely vigilant in trying to limit the exposure that we give or, bring to our teams. And so obviously the more we stay huddled together on campus, the safer we will likely be.
Thanks, Lori.
And Quentin, if I can add one more thing, just because student athletes that have reported early in previous years might be used to going off campus for a variety of things like even meals. We have worked with our dining services partner to make sure that from day one, even those students that report on August 13th, the dining commons will be open, or the dining hall will be open. And so we felt that was important. So again, not to say that we're going to put a tracking device on students and monitor their comings and goings, but we want to make sure they have what they need when they're on campus. And so that also includes meals, even though it's before the time frame when our semester officially starts for classes.
Awesome. And there's a question kind of close to that. and it talked just about generally throughout the semester, can students leave to go home and come back, or visit other people? And I'm guessing the answer is going to be kind of pretty similar in that as well.
Yeah, it is. You know, for the general student population, we would like to encourage, you know, that students would stay, just to be transparent. We obviously are putting a lot of precautions in place to make sure people feel safe. And when they leave campus, you know, I think some people criticize it at times, talking about the Huntington University bubble. But I lived that for 4 years as a student in an undergrad setting myself, and I loved it. And so we're going to be committed to making sure that there are still fun and enriching activities. But again, if people have life events, you know, parents' birthdays or weddings or those types of things, I guess the only thing we would ask out of respect to those fellow students and employees on campus is just to be mindful about avoiding unnecessary travel or unnecessary risks. You know, if it's a preference versus a need, or there's an opportunity to stay and enjoy life on campus that people chose HU for, we would certainly try to encourage that.
Love that. And then it looks like one final question possibly. Will students be required to do daily temperature checks?
At this point, that's not a consideration for all of our students. Certainly, we will have resources available for them to have their temperature taken if they're not feeling well. For athletes, and I'll let Coach Culler speak a little bit more to this, but that's a little bit different animal, just because of the interactions and the contact they will have, and quite frankly, mandates by the NAIA. So I'll allow her to speak a little bit more on that.
Yeah, as part of the protocol, the NAIA has given us doing a daily temperature check before any team activity will be a requirement, as well as answering, you know, self-monitoring questions about symptoms and potential exposure to someone that's tested positive. So that will be a daily routine when you're coming to practice. And again, that's more details that we'll get into closer to the time on exactly what student athletes will need to do and when, and those kinds of things, and how the training staff and the coaching staffs will be involved in all of that.
Thank you so much. That is I'm going to say that it's the last questions, but every time I say that, more questions pop up. So we'll see. I don't see any popping up, but if more do, that's completely fine. And if there's some that you guys think of, feel free to, you know, you can respond back to those emails that we sent out, or you can send Russ or Lori's questions directly. And they can answer those for you. I know that they're here to help, and they're here to any way that they can. And so that's what I love about Huntington. You can go to anyone for anything at any time, which I love. It's super cool. There's no disconnection in that. And so you're, like I said, more than welcome to you know, respond to any of those emails. Just want to give you a reminder, next week, as I was saying, is going to be Arthur and Brian talking about campus ministry and student life. And then after that, on the 28th, Adam Skiles and some other IT pals of ours are going to be talking about tech services in the fall. So we know that's going to be a big thing, because we kind of went through the spring semester and that was number one on all of our lists. And so we'll talk about that and what that looks like. And then August 4th, the final Tuesday Night Live, I'll be really sad when that comes around. Heather St. Peters and Erica Marshall are going to talk about internships and student success, which is super exciting. I know that's something that everyone's thinking about as well, especially as seniors and juniors, as you're preparing to kind of go out from there. Really appreciate you all coming out. I'm going to close this, as I do every week, with some prayer. I think that's the best thing to bring in these challenging times. So if you guys will bow your heads with me. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you so much for allowing us to come together to just be in community, to be in your presence, and to be with fellow believers and friends. We're just so thankful for that. Lord, I want to thank you for Huntington and all that it's doing to keep us safe, and you know, just is always there. I kind of mentioned that, but we're just so thankful that you've given us this community where we can feel at home, where we can feel like we're a family. And I'm excited to be back with my family in the fall when everyone comes back. And it's going to be different, but we're trusting you and we love you and we're so thankful for that. Lord, I pray that you can calm our nerves over these next couple of weeks, that you can give us patience and courage, and just give us flexibility. It's so hard, Lord, in a world where we just we kind of want what we want. We want it so fast. And so, Lord, I just pray that you instill that in my heart and you instill that in the hearts of the people I love and my friends. Lord, like I said, we love you so very, very much. And we pray that your will be done in everything that we say and do. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. So, thank you guys. That was Tuesday Night Live. We loved having you. We'll see you next week.